Hercule Poirot and the Case of the Vanishing Heiress. Chapter 1. The Vanishing of Evelyn Blackwood. The heavy grandfather clock in the drawing-room struck 8, its chimes echoing ominously through the vast corridors of Blackwood Manor. Lady Margaret sat poised on the velvet-upholstered chair, her hands clasped together, betraying a tension that her otherwise composed demeanor sought to conceal. Across from her, Oliver Trent leaned against the marble fireplace, his dark eyes fixed on Poirot with barely disguised impatience. I had seen this look before in many a suspect. Whether guilty or innocent, people often resented Poirot's calm, meticulous questioning. But my friend, unperturbed as ever, merely smoothed his mustache and regarded Lady Margaret with his usual penetrating gaze. "Tell me, madam," he said gently, "about the household. Who was present last night?" Lady Margaret inhaled deeply. "Aside from myself and Evelyn, there were my brother, Charles Blackwood, and his wife Helena. They have been staying with us for some weeks now. My housekeeper, Mrs. Elkins, and the maid, Alice, who attends to Evelyn, were also here. And, of course, Mr. Trent visited in the afternoon." Poirot nodded, committing each name to memory. "And the staff? How many servants are employed here?" "Only 3, Mrs. Elkins, Alice, and our butler, Mr. Graves. A small staff, 4. "Such a grand house," I remarked. Lady Margaret gave a weary smile. Evelyn was quite modern in her thinking. She disliked unnecessary extravagance. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes keen. "Was there anyone who might have had reason to wish your daughter harm?" Lady Margaret visibly hesitated. "No," she said at last. "At least, not that I know of." It was not a convincing denial, and Poirot's expression did not shift. "You must forgive me, madame, but hesitation is the enemy of truth. You had a thought just now. A suspicion, perhaps." Lady Margaret pursed her lips, then exhaled in resignation. "It is nothing, truly. Evelyn had a dear friend and artist, a young man named Daniel Moreau. I believe they were fond of one another before she became engaged to Oliver." "Ah," Poirot murmured, exchanging a glance with me. "A young artist, a betrothed heiress, and an engagement ring that had gone missing. A story as old as time. She had not seen him in months," Lady Margaret added quickly. "Not since her engagement. But I wonder, could he have come back?" "I should like to know more of this Mr. Moreau," Poirot said thoughtfully. "But let us not forget, madame, that a disappearance is not always an elopement. We must consider all possibilities." At this, Oliver Trent let out an exasperated scoff. "You are wasting time, Monsieur Poirot. Evelyn did not elope. She had no reason to. She loved me." Poirot regarded him with mild amusement. "Ah, but love, Monsieur Trent, is a thing most delicate. It can be certain today and wavering tomorrow." He tapped his fingertips together. "Now, before we proceed further, I would like to see Miss Blackwood's room." Lady Margaret nodded and rose to her feet. "This way, Mr. Poirot." We followed her up the grand staircase, our footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The hallway above was dimly lit, lined with tall windows overlooking the mist-laden grounds. A strange chill hung in the air, the weather from the draught or the unease settling over the house. I could not tell. Lady Margaret paused before a door at the far end. "This is Evelyn's room. Nothing has been touched since this morning." Poirot entered first, his sharp gaze sweeping across the chamber. It was a spacious yet modestly decorated room, the mark of a young woman who had no need for excess. A writing desk stood by the window, a wardrobe in the corner, and an ornate vanity mirror reflected the golden glow of the bedside lamp. Poirot moved with deliberate slowness, examining every detail. His fingers trailed lightly over the writing desk, where a book lay open, a single pearl earring resting atop its pages. "Curious," he murmured, "a book unfinished, an earring abandoned." Miss Blackwood left in haste. I stepped closer, peering at the book. "It's a volume of poetry." Poirot nodded absently, his attention shifting. He moved toward the wardrobe and opened it, inspecting the neatly arranged clothing. "Her traveling coat is here, and her shoes." He turned to Lady Margaret. "You are certain she did not leave of her own accord?" Lady Margaret's expression was resolute. "Evelyn would never have left without her coat, nor without a word to me." Poirot's gaze drifted to the bedside table. A silver hairbrush, a folded letter, and a small crystal perfume bottle sat neatly in place. He picked up the letter, examining the envelope. It was unsealed. Without hesitation, he unfolded it and read. His eyes flickered with something recognition. "Concern? What is it, Poirot?" I asked eagerly. Instead of answering, he handed the letter to Lady Margaret. She took it, her face paling as she read. "Meet me by the old bridge, at midnight. Come alone. It is urgent. D." Lady Margaret's hand trembled slightly. "D. Daniel Moreau." Poirot's mustache twitched, so it would seem. Oliver Trent's expression darkened. That wretched artist. He must be responsible. "For this, perhaps," Poirot said mildly. "Or perhaps, monsieur, it is exactly what we are meant to believe." He turned back toward the room, his fingers tapping his chin. "No, no, something is not right. A young woman vanishes yet. Her belongings remain. A letter summons her, yet no one saw her leave." His voice lowered, thoughtful. "Tell me, Lady Blackwood, is there a second exit to this house? One that does not pass through the main hall?" Lady Margaret hesitated. "Yes, there is an old servant's door leading to the gardens." "Then," Poirot said softly, "let US see if it was used last night." With that, he turned, leading the way out of the room, while the heavy air of Blackwood Manor seemed to thicken with secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 2. The gathering of suspects. The drawing-room of Blackwood Manor had taken on the air of an impromptu tribunal. The heavy velvet curtains had been drawn, the chandelier overhead casting a pale glow on the assembled company. Poirot, seated comfortably in a high-backed chair, observed each person in turn, his eyes missing nothing. I had seen this scene before suspects gathered, each of them shifting beneath the weight of his gaze, some indignant, some anxious, and a few too composed for comfort. Lady Margaret, still pale from the discovery of the letter, sat stiffly near the fireplace, hands clasped in her lap. Oliver Trent stood apart, arms crossed, a deep scowl fixed on his face. Opposite them, Charles Blackwood and his wife Helena sat side by side on a chaise longue. Charles, a broad-shouldered man with a sharp nose, looked mildly irritated. Being summoned. Helena, a delicate woman with pale golden hair, stared at Poirot with veiled curiosity. Mrs. Elkins. The housekeeper stood near the door, her lips pursed in disapproval. The maid, Alice, hovered just behind her, wringing her hands in apparent distress. The butler, Mr. Graves, remained perfectly still beside them, his aged face unreadable. Poirot cleared his throat gently. "Madame et Monsieur," he began, his voice carrying an air of quiet authority. "Miss Evelyn Blackwood has vanished, and I am here to discover why." Oliver Trent exhaled sharply. "We should be out searching for her, not sitting here answering questions." Poirot turned his gaze upon him. "Ah, but you see, monsieur, the answers we seek may already be in this room. If Miss Blackwood left of her own accord, then we must understand why. If she was taken, then someone here may hold the key." A silence settled over the room. Poirot continued, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "Let us begin with what we know. Miss Blackwood received a note instructing her to meet someone at the old bridge at midnight. The letter was signed with the initial D. At once Oliver Trent scoffed. "Daniel Moreau? That artist, he's the one behind this, I tell you." Poirot raised a hand. "Perhaps, monsieur, but let us not be hasty. Miss Blackwood did not take her coat, nor her travelling bag. These are curious details, are they not?" He turned to Lady Margaret. "Madame, when was the last time you saw your daughter?" Lady Margaret took a breath. "At dinner, around 8 o'clock. She was quiet. I assume she was merely tired." Poirot nodded. "And after dinner, I went to my room. I did not see her again. And you, Monsieur Blackwood?" Poirot's sharp gaze shifted to Charles. Charles frowned. "I spent the evening in the library, alone, with Helena." Helena Blackwood gave a small nod. "Yes, Charles and I were together the entire evening. We retired around 11. Poirot's gaze flickered. "And you, Monsieur Trent?" Oliver's scowl deepened. "I was not even in the house. I left at 6 in the evening. I was at my club in London." Poirot raised a delicate eyebrow. "Can this be confirmed?" Oliver bristled. "Of course. Several people saw me there. I didn't return to Blackwood Manor until this morning, when I heard the news." Poirot inclined his head slightly, filing away the information. "Mrs. Elkins, tell me, when did you last see Miss Blackwood?" The housekeeper folded her arms. She went up to her room after dinner. Alice went to her an hour later to see. If she needed anything, Poirot turned to the nervous maid. "Mademoiselle Alice?" Alice twisted the hem of her apron. "I knocked, sir, but she didn't answer. I thought she'd gone to sleep, so I didn't disturb her." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And you, Mr. Graves?" The butler straightened his posture. "I retired to my quarters at 10:30, sir. I heard nothing unusual." Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Curious," he murmured. "A young lady disappears, but no one sees her leave. No one hears a sound. It is as if she vanished into thin air." His gaze swept the room once more. "Now, Miss Amos, let us discuss Mr. Daniel Moreau." Lady Margaret sighed. "As I said before, they were once close, but Evelyn ended things before her engagement to Oliver." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And how did Monsieur Moreau take this rejection?" Lady Margaret hesitated. "I do not know. He left London shortly after, or so I believed." Poirot's fingers are drummed against his chair. "Then it seems we must pay a visit to Mr. Moreau." Oliver scoffed again. "There's no need for that. He left the note. He must have taken Evelyn." Poirot merely smiled. "Ah, Monsieur Trent, you are quick to find the culprit. But in my experience, the truth is rarely so simple." He stood, straightening his cuffs. "We shall visit Mr. Moreau immediately, and while we are gone, I would advise everyone to remain here. It is possible that Miss Blackwood will return of her own accord." He turned toward Lady Margaret. "Madame, if she does, you must inform me at once." Lady Margaret nodded, though her eyes held little hope. Poirot tapped his cane against the floor. "Come, Hastings, we have an artist to find." And with that, we stepped out into the misty evening, leaving behind the heavy air of secrets that still clung to Blackwood Manor. Chapter 3. The Artist's Secret. The mist lay thick over the countryside as we made our way toward the cottage of Daniel Moreau. Poirot, walking at a measured pace, tapped his cane lightly against the gravel path, deep in thought. I, however, was less composed. "Really, Poirot," I said, pulling my coat tighter against the chill. "You don't suspect Moreau, do you? The note alone is hardly conclusive proof." Poirot tilted his head. "Mon ami, you are quick to assume what I suspect and what I do not. The note is a piece of the puzzle, but one does not judge the whole. Painting by a single brush stroke, n'est-ce pas?" Before I could respond, we arrived at a modest stone cottage half hidden by ivy. A single lantern burned within, its glow flickering against the misty glass panes. Poirot rapped sharply on the wooden door. A moment later, footsteps sounded from inside. The door creaked open, revealing a man of medium height with dark hair falling over his forehead in careless disarray, his eyes deep-set and sharp-held. "A wary intelligence, yes?" he said, his voice cool. Poirot removed his hat with a slight bow. "Monsieur Moreau, I am Hercule Poirot. This is my associate, Captain Hastings. We have come to speak with you about Miss Evelyn Blackwood." Moreau's grip tightened on the door. "Evelyn," his voice had a rough edge to it. "What about her?" Poirot studied him for a moment before stepping forward. "May we come in, monsieur?" Moreau hesitated before nodding. He stepped aside, allowing us to enter. The cottage was sparsely furnished but orderly, the walls adorned with paintings, landscapes, portraits, and abstract shapes that seemed almost restless in their movement. An easel stood in one corner, a half-finished painting upon it. "Forgive the mess," Moreau said, crossing his arms. "Now, tell me, what's happened to Evelyn?" Poirot's gaze swept the room before resting on Moreau. "She has disappeared." "The tooth." Arda stiffened. "Disappeared? That's impossible." "Ah, but it is quite possible, monsieur," Poirot corrected. "She was last seen in her room last night. This morning she was gone. The only clue to her whereabouts is this." Poirot withdrew the letter from his pocket and handed it to Moreau. The artist's face darkened as he scanned the page. This is not my writing," he muttered. "I never sent this." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Interesting. Then you deny having asked Miss Blackwood to meet you at the bridge at midnight?" "Of course I deny it," Moreau snapped. "I haven't spoken to Evelyn in months." I frowned. "But surely you understand why suspicion would fall on you, Moreau. You and Miss Blackwood were once—" "I know what we were," Moreau interrupted. His voice had softened, but his expression was guarded. "She made her choice. I accepted it." Poirot took a slow step forward. "Then, tell me, Monsieur Moreau, where were you last night?" Moreau hesitated. "Here," he said at last. "I spent the evening painting. I didn't leave." "Can anyone confirm this?" Moreau's jaw tightened. "No," Poirot sighed. "You see the difficulty, do you not? A letter, supposedly from you, lures Miss Blackwood away. You have no alibi. It is most inconvenient." Moreau's fingers curled into a fist. "I had nothing to do with this. Someone is trying to frame me." Poirot's gaze did not waver. "And whom do you suspect, monsieur?" Moreau exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "Oliver Trent, most likely. He never forgave Evelyn for hesitating before accepting his proposal. He always saw me as a threat." I exchanged a glance with Poirot. "But why go to such lengths? If Miss Blackwood was already engaged to him, why would he need to frame you?" Moreau gave a bitter smile, because Evelyn never loved him. She was forced into it, pressured by her mother, by society. Oliver knew it. Perhaps he wanted to rid himself of the past once and for all. Poirot's expression remained neutral, but I knew he was processing every word. He gestured toward the half-finished painting on the easel. "This," he said, stepping closer, "is a striking piece. You paint often, Monsieur Moreau?" The artist nodded warily. "It's my profession." Poirot tapped the side of the canvas. "And yet, the paint here is still fresh. This suggests you were working late into the night, no?" Moreau hesitated. "Yes, I was." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Curious, then, that you have no alibi, yet your alibi sits before us in vivid color." Moreau exhaled, a faint smirk crossing his lips. "You see everything, don't you, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot smiled. "It is my métier." There was a pause before Poirot continued, his tone lighter. "Tell me, monsieur, have you received any unexpected visitors recently?" Moreau considered. "The question, now that you mention it. A few days ago, someone left a note under my door. No name, just a time and place. I ignored it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And where, pray, was this meeting supposed to take place?" Moreau hesitated. "The old bridge." Silence fell. Poirot exchanged a meaningful glance with me, before tucking his hands behind his back. "Monsieur Moreau," he said at last, "I believe you may be in greater danger than you realize." Moreau frowned. "What do you mean?" Poirot straightened his cuffs. "Someone wishes to make you a pawn in their game. Whether they intend to ruin you or worse remains to be seen." Moreau's eyes darkened. "Then I suggest we find Evelyn before it's too late." Poirot nodded gravely. "Just so, monsieur." As we stepped out of the cottage into the thickening mist, I could not shake the feeling that we were stepping deeper into something far more dangerous than we had anticipated. Chapter 4. A Shadow in the Fog. The night had drawn in, bringing with it a thick, rolling mist that curled around the trees like ghostly fingers. As Poirot and I made our way back toward Blackwood Manor, I could not shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. "There is something I do not like about this case, Poirot," I muttered, shivering slightly. "Something feels off." Poirot, walking with his usual measured stride, gave a small nod. "Ah, mon ami, you feel it too, do you? The sense that we are not merely solving a mystery, but playing a game of strategy against an opponent who remains unseen?" I exhaled. "Yes, Moreau's claim that Oliver Trent might have had something to do with Evelyn's disappearance. Do you believe it?" Poirot twirled his mustache thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But we must not allow suspicion to cloud our reason. We have a forgery letter written in Moreau's name, designed to lure Mademoiselle Blackwood away. That tells us two things. First, that she did not leave of her own free will, and second, that someone wished to direct our attention toward Moreau." I frowned. "But who? Trent?" Poirot shook his head. "It is too early to say. But I begin. To see the outline of something, Hastings, a pattern in the fog, if you will." We had just reached the iron gates of Blackwood Manor, when a figure suddenly emerged from the mist. I started, but Poirot remained still, his keen eyes locked onto the shape before us. "Who goes there?" I called out, my voice more uncertain. That I would have liked. The figure stepped closer, and the lantern light illuminated a pale, sharp-featured face. It was Oliver Trent. "You," he said coldly, his gaze fixing on Poirot. "I was told you were investigating Evelyn's disappearance." Poirot regarded him with mild interest. "Ah, Monsieur Trent, a pleasure. You come to us with information, perhaps?" Trent's jaw tightened. "I come to warn you, Poirot. You are wasting your time with Daniel Moreau." I exchanged a glance. With Poirot. And why, may I ask? Do you say that? I inquired. Trent stepped closer, his face shadowed with tension. Because I know for a fact that Moreau has never let go of Evelyn. He's obsessed with her. If she's gone, I would start by looking at him. Poirot sighed. It is most curious, Monsieur Trent. For you see, we have just come from speaking with Monsieur Moreau, and he said much the same of you. Trent's expression darkened. That's absurd. I loved Evelyn. I wanted to marry her, but she never truly returned my feelings. There was something bitter in his voice, and I caught the briefest flicker of something else in his eyes, resentment, perhaps. Poirot studied him carefully. Monsieur Trent, you were engaged to Mademoiselle Blackwood, yet you speak of her as though she were already lost to you. Was she having second thoughts? Trent hesitated. I don't know. Perhaps Evelyn was complicated. She never said no, but she never said yes with all her heart either. Poirot's gaze did not waver. And tell me, monsieur, where were you last night? Trent stiffened. Here, in the manor. Evelyn's mother can confirm it. I spoke with her before retiring for the night. Poirot nodded. Ah, very good. And you did not see Mademoiselle Blackwood at all? Trent shook his head. No, she went to bed early, or so I was told. Poirot tapped his cane against the ground. I see. And tell me, Monsieur Trent, have you received any strange letters of late? Trent's brow furrowed. Letters? No. Why? Poirot smiled faintly. A mere curiosity, monsieur. Nothing more. For a moment, there was silence. Then Trent exhaled sharply. Look, I don't know what Moreau told you, but I had nothing to do with Evelyn's disappearance. And if you think he's innocent, you're a fool. Poirot inclined his head. We shall see, Monsieur Trent. Trent scowled, then turned and strode back toward the manor, vanishing into the mist. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Well, I muttered, that was charming. Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he bent down, peering at the damp ground near the gate. Hastings, he said suddenly, observe. I stepped closer, frowning. There, barely visible in the soft earth, was the impression of a single footprint, small, delicate, unmistakably belonging to a woman. A shiver ran down my spine. Evelyn? Poirot straightened. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone else entirely. I swallowed. You? Think someone else was here last night. Poirot's gaze was unreadable. I think, Hastings, that the game is only just beginning, before tucking his hands behind his back. Monsieur Moreau, he said at last, I believe you may be in greater danger than you realize. Moreau frowned. What do you mean? Poirot straightened his cuffs. Someone wishes to make you a pawn in their game. Whether they intend to ruin you, or worse, remains to be seen. Moreau's eyes darkened. Then I suggest we find Evelyn before it's too late. Poirot nodded gravely. Just so, monsieur. As we stepped out of the cottage into the thickening mist, I could not shake the feeling that we were stepping deeper into something far more dangerous than we had anticipated. Chapter 5. The Whispered Confession. The air inside Blackwood Manor was thick with tension as Poirot and I stepped through the grand entrance hall. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed 11. The house, despite its grandeur, felt curiously lifeless. As we made our way toward Lady Blackwood's sitting room, Poirot suddenly halted, his head tilting slightly. I followed his gaze to the staircase, where a figure stood half hidden in the dim light that it was Margaret, the maid. She hesitated, then stepped forward, wringing her hands. Her eyes darted nervously toward the corridor behind her. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered. "Please, I must speak with you." Poirot regarded her carefully. "But of course, mademoiselle. Shall we sit?" She shook her head quickly. "No, not here. Someone might hear." Poirot exchanged a glance with me, then nodded. "Very well. Lead the way." Margaret led us through a side passage and into a small, dimly lit servants' quarters. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with linens and cleaning supplies. She shut the door firmly behind us before turning back, her hands gripping her apron. "I didn't know what to do," she said in a hushed voice. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything. But now I feel I must." Poirot folded his arms. "Courage, mademoiselle. Tell us what troubles you." Margaret swallowed. Hard. "It's about Miss Evelyn." My breath caught. Poirot remained calm, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "Go on." The maid twisted the edge of her apron. "The night she disappeared, I saw her." I started. "You did?" She nodded quickly. "It was just past midnight." I had been fetching fresh sheets for the guest rooms when I heard the front door creak. At first I thought it might be the wind, but when I peered down the hall, I saw Miss Evelyn. She was sneaking out. Poirot's expression did not change, but I could tell he was listening intently. "And she was alone?" Margaret hesitated, then shook her head. "No, there was a man waiting for her by the door. I didn't see his face clearly, but he was tall." Dark-haired, I exchanged a glance with Poirot. "Moreau?" I suggested. Poirot's lips pursed. "Perhaps, but let us not jump to conclusions." He turned back to Margaret. "Mademoiselle, you are quite sure of this?" She nodded vigorously. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I saw them leave together." Miss Evelyn looked troubled, as if she were arguing with him, but she did not resist when he took her by the arm and led her outside. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against his sleeve. "Did you hear anything? Did she say anything to this man?" Margaret bit her lip. "Only one thing." As they stepped out into the night, she said, "It's too late to turn back now." A chill ran down my spine. "Good heavens!" Poirot inclined his head slightly. "And you told no one of this?" Margaret shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. "I was afraid, sir. What if it was nothing? What if she simply ran away with a suitor, and I caused unnecessary trouble? But now that she hasn't returned, I keep thinking that perhaps something terrible has happened." Poirot reached out and patted her hand gently. "You did well to come to us, mademoiselle, and you must tell no one else of what you have seen." "Not yet." Margaret sniffed, nodding quickly. "I won't, sir. I promise." Poirot gave her a reassuring smile before leading me back out into the hall. As soon as we were alone, I exhaled. "Poirot, this changes everything. Evelyn did leave willingly, but under duress." Poirot nodded. "Indeed, Hastings. And what do you make of her words? It's too late to turn back now," I frowned. "It suggests she had made some kind of choice. A choice she was regretting." Poirot's gaze darkened precisely. "And that, mon ami, is the most troubling clue of all." Chapter 6. The Letter and the Study. The shadows in Blackwood Manor stretched long and deep as evening descended, the glow of the oil lamps flickering against the dark wooden panels. The house had grown eerily silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock at the end of the hall. Poirot and I made our way back toward the grand staircase, but my mind still clung to Margaret's words. Evelyn had left willingly, yet reluctantly. The contradiction gnawed at me. If she had left of her own volition, why had she looked so afraid? And more importantly, who had taken her away? Moreau? Or was there another figure in this game we had yet to see? Poirot, who had been walking with his hands neatly folded behind his back, suddenly paused. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Hastings," he murmured, "there is something that troubles me." "What is it?" I asked, watching him closely. "Our young maid, Margaret, is an intelligent girl and observer. She saw the figure who came for Mademoiselle Evelyn. She noted his height, his manner, even the way he stood in the shadows." Poirot tapped a thoughtful finger against his temple. "And yet she did not see his face." I frowned. "It was dark, Poirot." "Oui, mon ami, it was dark, but not impenetrable. And if she could make out his build, his posture, why not his face?" Poirot's voice dropped a note lower. "Unless, of course, she did not wish to see it." "You mean she was afraid?" "Perhaps." Poirot's keen eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Or perhaps she already knew who it was." Before I could reply, a sharp voice interrupted us. "Ah, there you are, Monsieur Poirot." We turned to see Lord Blackwood emerging from the dim corridor. That led to his study. His face, usually one of rigid composure, was lined with weariness. The deep creases on his forehead suggested he had neither slept nor found solace since our arrival. "Would you join me for a moment?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "There is something I wish to show you." Poirot straightened his cuffs. "But, of course, my lord." We followed him into the study, a stately room lined with bookshelves filled with ancient tomes, their spines worn with age. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the large mahogany desk. In the center of the room, above it, a grand oil painting of Lady Blackwood hung, her gaze eternally poised and unreadable. Lord Blackwood stepped behind the desk and picked up a folded sheet of parchment. His fingers gripped it tightly before he held it out toward Poirot. "This." "Morning," he said grimly. "My butler found this among Evelyn's belongings. It appears to be a letter." Poirot took the parchment with delicate precision and unfolded it carefully. His dark eyes scanned the words, and he began reading aloud, "Dearest. Evelyn, I know you have doubts, but you must trust me. By the time you read this, it will be too late to turn back. We have come too far now. There is no other way. Tonight, meet me at the gate at midnight. Alone. No one must know. If you hesitate, remember what is at stake. Yours." A thick silence settled over the room, punctuated only by the steady crackling of the fire. I exhaled sharply. Good heavens, Poirot! Whoever wrote this letter expected her to come willingly. Lord Blackwood's voice was tight. "I do not recognize the handwriting, and I know of no one with the initial A in Evelyn's circle." Poirot remained, silent, his gaze fixed on the parchment, his fingers smoothing over the edges with an almost imperceptible motion. "The choice of words is most intriguing," he murmured at last. "We have come too far now. There is no other way. It suggests a sense of inevitability, almost as though Mademoiselle Evelyn had no choice but to comply." Lord Blackwood's expression darkened. "If someone was forcing her into something, I swear I will see them pay for it." Poirot turned the letter over. "There is no date, no indication of when it was written." "That is curious." I frowned. "Do you think it's possible she had been receiving such letters for a while?" Lord Blackwood hesitated, then said, "Now that you mention it." Evelyn had been rather withdrawn in recent weeks. She spent long hours alone in the study, writing letters of her own. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Writing letters? To whom? I assumed they were social correspondences, but I never saw them posted. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly against his lapel. It is possible she was corresponding with this, I shook my head. But what could have been at stake that would make her leave? Lord Blackwood's fists clenched. That is what I fear most. Poirot folded the letter neatly and placed it back on the desk. We must tread carefully, my lord. The truth is often concealed beneath many layers. Lord Blackwood exhaled heavily and ran a hand on his face. I cannot bear to think of her out there, alone, or worse, in danger. Poirot's voice was gentle, but firm. Mademoiselle Evelyn is not alone, my lord. If she is in danger, we shall find her. A long pause stretched between us before Blackwood finally nodded. Poirot turned back toward the fireplace, his eyes narrowing slightly as they settled on the ornate brass clock atop the mantel. His lips pursed as though calculating something. I watched him curiously. Poirot, what is it? Instead of answering, Poirot stepped closer to the mantel and picked up a small ivory paper knife lying beside the clock. He turned it over in his hands. His brow furrowed. What do you make of this, Hastings? He asked, holding it up that I blinked. A paper knife? Rather an elegant one, I suppose. Elegant, yes, Poirot murmured. And yet unnecessary, I frowned. What do you mean? Poirot turned the knife over again. This is unused. A paper knife of such fine craftsmanship should show some signs of wear ink stains, slight nicks from cutting letters. He raised his brows, and yet it does not. Lord Blackwood looked puzzled. Surely that means nothing? Poirot smiled faintly. Perhaps. Or perhaps it means that the letters Mademoiselle Evelyn wrote were never meant to be read. A chill ran down my spine. Poirot, are you suggesting she was writing them for appearance's sake? Poirot's smile faded. It is a possibility we must consider. He placed the knife back onto the mantel and dusted his hands. Hastings, he said, turning toward me, I believe it is time we took a stroll. I frowned. A stroll? Where to? Poirot straightened his jacket. The garden, mon ami. There is something in the night air that stirs the little gray cells. Chapter 7. The Secret in the Garden. The night air was cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth, as Poirot and I stepped into the Blackwood Manor garden. The moon, half veiled by drifting clouds, cast long ghostly shadows across the manicured hedges and the moss-covered stone paths. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, its call eerie in the stillness. I pulled my coat tighter around me. Poirot, what exactly are we looking for out here? Poirot walked at a measured pace, his hands neatly folded behind his back. Ah, Hastings, you must train yourself to see what is not immediately visible. His voice was calm, but held an undercurrent of focus. Consider, mon amie Mademoiselle Evelyn was last seen being led toward the gates at midnight. If she met this mysterious here, there may be some sign of their meeting. I glanced around at the dark expanse of the garden. But the grounds are massive. How do we know where she went? Poirot suddenly halted and gestured toward the cobblestone pathway that wound toward the west side of the estate. Look closely, Hastings. What do you see? I followed his gaze, squinting. At first I saw nothing unusual, just the winding path leading toward the iron gates in the distance. But then, under the faint moonlight, I noticed something. Ground was disturbed. A section of the pathway appeared slightly uneven. The cobblestones dislodged as if someone had walked across them in a hurry. And there, just at the edge of the path where it met the damp earth, were faint footprints, small, delicate impressions in the soil. Poirot crouched down, examining them closely. These prints belonged to a woman, Nessipa. He pointed at the slender shape of the heel marks. The size and depth suggest light footsteps made in haste, perhaps with apprehension. I swallowed. Evelyn's? Most likely. Poirot's gaze swept further ahead. And here, mon ami, do you see? He pointed just beside the prints, where another set of larger, heavier footprints overlapped them. Whoever had been with, Evelyn had walked directly over her tracks. These belong to a man, Poirot murmured. He is taller, heavier. He straightened and glanced toward the iron gates, then back toward the hedge-lined pathway leading deeper into the garden. I frowned. Poirot, if they were leaving the estate, why are some of the footprints leading back into the garden? Poirot's? Sharp eyes gleamed. Ah, Hastings, now you're thinking. He gestured toward a narrow path leading toward the rose garden. Shall we investigate? We moved carefully along the stone path, the scent of damp roses thick in the air. The rose garden, though beautiful, had a peculiar stillness to it, an eerie quiet that set my nerves on edge. Poirot suddenly stopped beside a stone bench, his eyes narrowing, regard as Hastings. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach tighten. The stone bench, half hidden among the flowers, lay a scrap of fabric pale blue, almost silvery under the moonlight. It had been torn, the edges frayed. I picked it up carefully. This must have been from Evelyn's dress. Poirot nodded. Oui, and see here? He pointed toward the thorny hedge just behind the bench. There were more pieces of fabric caught. In the thorns, as if someone had struggled against them, I exhaled slowly. Poirot, do you think she was trying to escape? Poirot was silent for a long moment, his fingers lightly brushing the frayed edges of the fabric. Then he spoke. It is a possibility, Hastings. Or perhaps someone else was leading her away, and she hesitated. A rustling noise suddenly broke the silence. We both froze, our heads snapping toward the far end of the garden. A shadow moved among the trees, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. I tensed. Who's there? Poirot raised a hand, silencing. Amy, we stood utterly still, listening. Then another sound, a soft exhale, followed by hurried footsteps. Whoever it was had realized they'd been seen and was running. Without thinking, I bolted forward. Stop, Hastings! Poirot called after me, but I was already chasing the shadow through the maze of hedges. My heart pounded as I rounded a corner, catching a brief glimpse of the figure darting through the trees. Then, suddenly, dash nothing dot, I skidded to a halt. The garden was empty. The air was silent. The figure had vanished as though swallowed by the night itself. Poirot arrived moments later, breathless but composed. Mon Dieu, Hastings, you must learn to resist your instincts to charge like a bull. I turned in frustration. But they were here, Poirot. Someone was watching us. Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the area. Then he suddenly pointed toward the ground near my feet. I followed his gesture, and my breath caught. A small silver locket lay in the grass. Poirot crouched and picked it up delicately. He opened it with a soft click. Inside, a tiny, delicate portrait was enclosed under the glass dot. It was Evelyn Blackwood. A heavy silence settled between us. Poirot turned the locket over, running his fingers along the smooth silver surface. There was a tiny engraving on the back, barely visible in the dim light. Poirot read the inscription aloud, "For E always." A letter ran down my spine. Poirot. It's him. Poirot nodded. Slowly. We Hastings, the elusiva. I swallowed. But why would he drop this? If it belonged to him, surely he would have kept it. Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. Unless, mon ami, It did not belong to him at all. I frowned. You mean Evelyn had it? Poirot's gaze was unreadable. Perhaps she did. Or perhaps it was meant for someone else. Entirely. The wind stirred the trees, and the garden seemed even darker than before. I shivered, a deep unease settling in my chest. Whoever had been watching us tonight had left this locket behind on purpose, and I had the unsettling feeling that it was not a mistake, but a warning. Chapter 8. The Truth Beneath the Floorboards. The silver locket lay between Poirot's gloved fingers, its delicate chain catching the faint moonlight. Though small, it carried an unsettling weight, an object of intimacy and secrecy, left behind. In the garden, like a whisper of the past, the inscription on the back lingered in my mind. For E, always. Of Evelyn, Blackwood's initials were clear enough. And the mysterious figure she was last seen with, the man whose presence lurked in every shadow of Blackwood Manor. I shivered involuntarily. Poirot, what do we do now? Poirot snapped the locket shut with a soft click. We think Hastings, and we ask ourselves the right questions. He turned the locket over once more. This was not lost. It was left. Left? But why? Poirot's sharp eyes flickered toward the dark expanse of the trees. To guide us, mon ami, or perhaps to mislead us. He slipped the locket into his pocket. Come, Hastings. The answers will not reveal themselves in the cold night air. We returned to the house, the warmth inside feeling strangely oppressive. Blackwood Manor had an air of expectation, as though it too was waiting for something or someone to break the silence. Poirot led the way to the study, where he retrieved a small notebook from his pocket. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing flickering shadows across the grand bookshelves. Let us piece together what we know, he said, settling into an armchair. Mademoiselle Evelyn was last seen alive near the garden gates. She met. With A, we have found her torn fabric, signs of a struggle. And now this locket. I nodded, leaning forward. And someone was watching us tonight. Poirot tapped the notebook. Whoever it was did not want to be seen, but they wanted us to find this. My fingers drummed against the armrest. Poirot, do you think Evelyn was trying to escape Blackwood Manor? Poirot's expression darkened. That, Hastings, is the question. If she was escaping, then why? He leaned forward, his voice lowering. And why was she taken back inside? I frowned. Inside? But we don't know that for sure. Poirot's gaze was sharp. But we do. The footprints, mon ami. Some led back into the garden. But others? He gestured toward the ceiling. Led toward the house. A strange unease crept up my spine. Poirot, are you saying Evelyn never left? I am saying, he murmured, that she may still be here. A sudden knock at the steady door made me start, that it was Mrs. Weatherby, the housekeeper. The dim candlelight made her lined face appear even more severe. Pardon, Mr. Poirot, but I heard you returned. Mr. Blackwood wishes to speak with you at once. Poirot and I exchanged glances. Very well, Poirot said, smoothly standing. Let us not keep the master of the house waiting. We found Arthur Blackwood in his private quarters, a vast, dimly lit room lined with heavy drapes and antique furniture. He sat by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in one hand, his expression ashen. He gestured for us to sit. You've been prowling the grounds, Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Oui, monsieur. Seeking the truth. Blackwood exhaled sharply. I assume you've found something. Poirot removed the locket from his pocket and set it on the polished mahogany table between them. This, Blackwood's face barely flickered. He swirled the brandy in his glass. "Evelyn's! You recognize it?" "She wore it often." His gaze was unreadable. It was a gift from a childhood friend. Poirot studied him. "A friend whose name begins with a A." A long silence. Then Blackwood took a slow sip of his drink. "Perhaps," I bristled. "With all due respect, sir, your sister is missing, possibly worse. If you know something, you must tell." U.S. Blackwood's fingers tightened around his glass. "I know nothing," he said quietly. Poirot leaned forward. "Then perhaps you can tell us why the footprints returned to the house." Blackwood's jaw tightened. The flames in the fireplace crackled louder, filling the silence. At last, he spoke. "If she came back, she would have come through the servants' entrance." I frowned. "But why? Surely if she had second thoughts, she could have come." "Through the front doors." "No." Blackwood's voice was hoarse. "She wouldn't have wanted anyone to see." A chilling thought formed in my mind. "Poirot, if Evelyn came back and no one saw her, then where did she go?" Poirot's gaze swept the room. Then, very quietly, he murmured, "Perhaps we must look beneath our feet." It was past midnight when we found ourselves in the east wing, where the servants' entrance led to a narrow corridor. The house was eerily silent. The weight of old secrets pressing down on us. Poirot ran his fingers along the wooden floorboards, his expression thoughtful. "The design of this house is quite interesting, n'est-ce pas? Many of these older manors were built with hidden compartments, storage spaces, smuggling tunnels, secret rooms." I shuddered. "Secret rooms?" Poirot tapped the floor lightly. "Listen." I crouched beside him. At first I heard nothing but the ticking of the grandfather clock down the hall. Then a hollow sound. Poirot smiled grimly. "Voila!" My pulse quickened. "Poirot, do you think—" He motioned for silence. Then, with delicate precision, he pressed his fingers along the edges of the floorboard. A soft creak. Then, to my shock, one of the boards lifted. Beneath it was darkness, a hidden compartment, large enough to conceal. My throat tightened. Poirot. He pulled a small oil lamp from the wall and tilted it downward, allowing the light to seep into the darkness. And then I saw it. A scrap of pale blue fabric, the same silvery blue fabric from Evelyn's dress. Sight of it made my stomach lurch. She had been here. Poirot exhaled slowly. "It seems, Hastings, that Mademoiselle Evelyn was not taken out of the house." His voice was quiet. "She was hidden within it." The revelation sent a chill down my spine. If Evelyn had returned that night, if she had been inside this house all along, then the question was no longer who took her. It was who kept her here. And, perhaps more chillingly, why. Chapter 9. The man in the portrait. The flickering oil lamp cast long shadows over the dust-covered floor as Poirot and I crouched beside the gaping hole in the wooden planks. The fragment of pale blue fabric trembled slightly in my hands. It was unmistakably the same material as Evelyn Blackwood's dress, the one she had worn the night she vanished. I looked at Poirot, my throat tight. "She was here," I whispered. "She was right here, beneath our feet." Poirot's sharp eyes darkened. "Oui, mon ami." He reached into the opening, his gloved fingers brushing against something else, something small and cold. "Ring." The delicate band gleamed faintly in the lamplight, its surface etched with intricate initials. I leaned in, squinting at the tiny engraving. E.B. I swallowed hard. Poirot. This belonged to Evelyn. Poirot nodded solemnly, turning the ring over between his fingers. "A woman does not part with such a thing lightly, Hastings. It was left here, just as the locket was left in the garden. His expression turned grave. "It is a breadcrumb trail." I shuddered. But if she was here, where is she now? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he reached further into the dark space beneath the floorboards. His fingers met something solid, and he pulled it free. A scrap of parchment. The edges were frayed, as though it had been torn from a larger document. The ink was faded, but a few words remained legible. "Not safe. Must not." Poirot held it to the light, studying the smudged letters. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "She tried to leave us a message." I felt an eerie chill crawl up my spine. "Poirot, do you think she was hiding here? That she had to hide?" Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. "Or that someone forced her to?" A sudden noise made me start. The faintest creak of a floorboard behind us. Poirot's head snapped up. He reached for the lamp, dimming the light. Hastings stayed very still. A shadow moved in the dim corridor beyond. A figure, lurking at the edge of the darkness, watching. I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs. Poirot's hand tightened around my wrist in warning. The shadow shifted. Then dash footsteps, soft at first, then growing fainter as they retreated down the corridor. The silence that followed was suffocating. Poirot exhaled softly. "We are not alone, mon ami." I swallowed hard. "Do you think they saw what we found?" "I think," Poirot murmured, standing up and dusting off his hands, "that someone does not want us looking beneath the floorboards." He bent down and carefully replaced the wooden planks, leaving the space exactly as we had found it. "Come, Hastings, we must go." "Where?" Poirot's gaze flickered toward the grand staircase at the end of the corridor. "To the portrait hall." The portrait hall of Blackwood Manor was a long, dimly lit corridor, lined with towering oil paintings of the Blackwood family's ancestors. Heavy crimson drapes covered the windows, leaving the space bathed in shadows despite the candelabra flickering along the walls. The air was thick with dust, and the aged gilded frames loomed over us like silent spectators. Poirot strode forward with purpose, his eyes scanning the paintings one by one. "Hastings," he murmured, "do you recall what Blackwood said earlier this evening?" I frowned. "You mean about the footprints?" "None about the servants' entrance. He said if Evelyn had returned, she would not have used the main door. She would have come through the back." I nodded. "Yes, but what does that have to do with the portraits?" Poirot stopped before a particularly large painting near the end of the hall. The plaque beneath it read, "Arthur Blackwood, 1865%. Step closer," studying the lifelike depiction of the man. Arthur Blackwood's sharp features were immortalized in dark brushstrokes, his piercing gaze following us wherever we moved. Poirot's fingers ghosted over the frame. "Do you see anything unusual, Hastings?" I studied the painting. "It's unsettling, certainly, but I don't see." Then I did. Just beneath the frame, where the edge of the canvas met the wall, was a thin seam, so faint it was nearly invisible. I felt a jolt of realization. "Poirot, this isn't just a painting." Poirot gave me a knowing smile. "T'ers bin mon ami." He pressed his gloved fingers along the bottom edge, applying pressure. With a soft click, the painting swung inward, revealing a hidden doorway. I stared. "Good Lord!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Shall we?" Beyond the painting, a narrow staircase spiraled downward into darkness. The air smelled of damp stone and old secrets. Poirot held the oil lamp aloft, illuminating the path. "Stay close." "Hastings." I swallowed hard and followed. The steps were uneven and coated in dust, as though no one had walked them in years. Yet, as we descended, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here recently. Dot at the bottom of the stairs. A heavy iron door loomed before us. Poirot ran his fingers over the surface. Rust had eaten away at the edges, but the lock was modern. Polished and well-maintained, someone has been using this door, he murmured. He reached into his pocket, producing a set of delicate lockpicks. Poirot, I whispered, glancing behind us. Are you certain this is wise? Poirot smiled. Faintly, I would rather regret opening a door than regret never knowing what lay behind it. With a soft click, the lock gave way. Poirot exhaled and slowly pushed the door open. The room beyond was small and windowless, filled with old furniture, dust-covered bookshelves, and a single chair in the center of the floor. Dot, and on that chair, a piece of rope frayed at the edges. I felt my stomach drop. Poirot, this looks like someone was tied up here. Poirot moved forward, his gaze sweeping the room. Then, very carefully, he bent down and picked up a single silver hairpin from the floor. I recognized it instantly. Evelyn's Poirot turned to me, his expression grave. She was here. I felt the weight of the truth pressing down on me. Dot, someone had brought Evelyn here. Someone had kept her here. Dot. And now she was gone. Chapter 10. The whisper in the walls. The small, windowless room felt suffocating, its damp stone walls seeming to close in around us. Poirot's fingers turned the silver hairpin over and over, his sharp gaze dark with thought. I swallowed, glancing at the frayed rope still tied to the chair. The implications were horrifying. Evelyn Blackwood had been kept here tied down, unable to escape. But by whom? And where was she now? Poirot exhaled, slipping the hairpin into his pocket. Mon ami, he said quietly, we must tread carefully. Whoever brought Evelyn here has already taken measures to conceal the truth. I nodded, my pulse still hammering. But this place, this secret room, it proved she didn't just vanish. Someone wanted her gone. Poirot's lips thinned. Or someone wanted her hidden. The flickering oil lamp cast eerie shadows across the old furniture, illuminating dust-covered bookshelves, a small wooden desk, and the worn rug that covered most of the stone floor. Poirot turned his attention to the desk. A prisoner may leave no words, no letters, but they may still leave traces, I stepped closer as Poirot ran his gloved fingers over the dusty surface, searching for something, anything that might explain what had happened here. Then his hand stilled, beneath the lamp's glow. He pointed to something faint but distinct scratches. In the wood, I leaned in. The marks were shallow, hastily carved, but they formed letters. Help. The word was cut off. The carving wasn't finished. A chill ran through me. Poirot. His expression was grim. She tried to leave a message. She tried to tell someone she was here. I shuddered, picturing Evelyn alone in this room, desperate, clawing at the desk, to leave even this small trace of herself. But before she could finish, she was taken. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he examined the desk further. Then, suddenly, he stiffened. What is it? I asked. He reached down, his fingers slipping beneath the rug. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled it back, and there on the cold stone floor was something I hadn't expected. A TR APD-OOR. The iron ring embedded in the wood was stiff with age, but Poirot grasped it firmly and pulled. With a groan, the trapdoor swung open, revealing a black void. Beneath us, a rush of cold, stale air drifted up, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else. Decay. Poirot held the oil lamp aloft, casting its golden glow downwards. A narrow tunnel stretched into the darkness, the dirt walls uneven, as if carved by hand. My stomach turned. Poirot, do you think this leads outside? Poirot's eyes gleamed with sharp focus. Perhaps, or perhaps it leads to something far more disturbing. I hesitated. And you mean to go down there? Poirot gave me a small smile. Courage, Hastings. The answers we seek may lie below. With that, he descended into the dark. I exhaled, bracing myself, and followed. The moment my feet touched the damp ground, I felt the weight of the tunnel pressing around me. The earthy walls were close, the air thick with dust. It was unsettling, like stepping into a grave. Poirot moved ahead, the lamp's light flickering across the tunnel's uneven walls. I whispered, "If Evelyn was taken through here, someone must have known about this passage." "Oui," Poirot murmured. "This tunnel is no accident. It was built for a purpose." We pressed on, the passage twisting and turning beneath the manor. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our footsteps against the damp floor. Then something shifted ahead, a faint, almost inaudible rustle. Poirot halted instantly, holding up a hand. I froze, straining to listen. The noise came. Again, a whisper, dot low, unclear, but real, dot. My breath caught. "Did you hear that?" Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The whispering continued faint and fragmented, like words spoken through stone. "Not safe. Leave." My skin prickled. "Poirot, someone's here." Poirot said nothing. Instead, he took a step forward. "We must see what lies ahead." I swallowed hard and followed. The tunnel narrowed, the air growing colder. Then, just as I was about to ask Poirot if he saw anything, the whispering stopped, and in the sudden silence a door loomed ahead. The wooden door was old, reinforced with heavy iron bands. There was no handle, only a keyhole. Poirot ran his fingers over the surface. Locked. I exhaled, glancing behind us. "Do you think whoever was whispering is inside?" Poirot didn't answer. Instead, he produced his lockpicks once more. The tunnel was deathly silent as he worked. The delicate click-click of metal against metal, the only sound. Then, click-dot. The door creaked open. Poirot lifted the lamp and stepped inside. The room. Beyond was unlike anything I had expected, that it was not another damp underground chamber. Instead, the walls were lined with bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of old paper and ink. A heavy wooden desk sat in the center, littered with papers. An unlit oil lamp and a silver pocket watch dot, and on the far wall, a map of Blackwood Manor. Covered in red markings, I stepped closer, my pulse quickening. This is a study," I murmured. Poirot's gaze swept across the room, his expression calculating. "Non, mon ami. This is something more." He lifted a sheet of parchment from the desk. The ink was still fresh dot. Someone had been here recently dot, and they had left behind a name. Scrawled at the bottom of the document, as if hastily signed Arthur Blackwood dot, my breath caught. Poirot Arthur? Poirot's expression remained unreadable. He lifted the pocket watch from the desk, turning it over. Another engraving, another set of initials. E.B. I stared. Evelyn's? Poirot's fingers tightened around the watch. We. I swallowed. Poirot, what does this mean? Poirot's gaze flickered toward the map, then back to the papers on the desk. It means, Hastings, he said softly, that this mystery is far from over. The name in the ledger. The oil lamp flickered, its dim glow casting restless shadows across the underground study. Poirot stood motionless, the silver pocket watch still in his grip, his sharp eyes scanning the room. I exhaled slowly, the weight of what we had just discovered pressing against my ribs. Arthur Blackwood. His name was scrawled across the parchment, the ink still fresh, as if the writer had only recently left this room. And then there was the pocket watch engraved, with the initials E.B. I felt a chill at the back of my neck. Poirot, I murmured, if this watch belonged to Evelyn, then she was here. Poirot nodded slowly. We, and I fear she may still be in grave danger. I turned back to the desk, my fingers brushing across the scattered papers. The documents. Appeared official, some stamped, others handwritten, but one stood out among the rest. A ledger, bound in dark leather, its pages worn at the edges. Poirot flipped it open. The handwriting was small and meticulous, listing names, dates, and amounts of money. A record of transactions. I frowned. What is this? Poirot didn't answer immediately. He scanned the names, his finger tracing down the list, until suddenly, S.D.O.P.P.E. I leaned in, my heart pounding as I read the name beneath his fingertip. Evelyn Blackwood. Beside it, in the column labeled Debts Settled, was a large sum of money. I swallowed hard. Debts? But Evelyn was wealthy. Why would her name be in here? Poirot's expression darkened. A question, mon ami, that may lead us to the heart of this mystery. The ledger's entries spanned several years, with transactions involving various names, some crossed out, others underlined. But Evelyn's name was one of the most recent. Poirot flipped through more pages. Another familiar name appeared, Arthur Blackwood. His entries, however, were different. No amounts of money were. Listed beside his name, only a single mark, drawn in heavy ink, a symbol resembling an X dot. My stomach twisted. Does this mean he wasn't settling debts? Poirot's brow furrowed. It suggests something else entirely. I glanced around the study, my mind racing. Poirot, what if this ledger isn't about money at all? What if these are records? Of something else? Something more sinister? Poirot nodded slowly. Perhaps Hastings, but we require more proof before making conclusions. His gaze flickered to the map of Blackwood Manor, still pinned to the wall. The red markings clustered around certain rooms, the West Wing, the library, and the underground passage we were standing in. This room was known to someone. Poirot murmured, someone who used it as a meeting place, or a hiding place. A sudden thought struck me. Poirot, if Evelyn was here, could she have left behind another clue? Without waiting for an answer, I began searching the room, running my hands over the bookshelves, the floor, the desk. Poirot did the same, moving methodically. Then a faint creak beneath my palm. Poirot turned sharply. Hastings! I pressed against the desk's surface again. The wood shifted ever so slightly. Poirot moved beside me, his fingers sliding under the edge of the desk. With a sharp click, a hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a single folded letter. I swallowed hard. Poirot. This must be it. He carefully unfolded the yellowed paper, his sharp gaze scanning its contents. As he read. His face grew dark with realization. I leaned in, my heart pounding. The letter was short, the handwriting hurried. Perhaps even desperate. If anything happens to me, the truth lies beneath the old chapel. Signed, EBI. Exhaled sharply. Poirot. The chapel? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, mon ami. And I fear we may not be the only ones searching for it. We moved swiftly, retracing our steps through the narrow tunnel, Poirot holding the letter tightly in one hand. When we emerged back into the small hidden room within the manor, the air felt different, charged with something unseen. Poirot extinguished, the lamp pressing his ear to the wooden door before stepping out into the hallway. I followed, my nerves on edge. Blackwood Manor was silent, the corridors empty, but an eerie feeling settled over me. "Poirot," I whispered, "if someone else is looking for Evelyn, we could be walking straight into a trap." Poirot gave me a small, knowing smile. "Exactement. But we have something they do not," I frowned. "What's that?" He lifted the letter, tapping it lightly. "Knowledge, mon ami. And knowledge is always a step ahead." With that, we moved toward the chapel. The old chapel sat on the outskirts of the Blackwood estate, shrouded in overgrown ivy and time-worn stone. The night air was cold, the sky heavy with dark clouds, casting an ominous stillness over the ruins. We approached cautiously, the wooden doors groaning as Poirot pushed them open. Inside, the chapel was eerily intact. Dust-covered pews lined the aisles, and, at the far end, an ancient stone altar loomed beneath a faded stained-glass window. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the space. "Beneath," he murmured. "We must search below." I hesitated. "You think there's another passage?" Poirot stepped forward, his fingers running along the altar's base. Then he pressed against a small carving. A click echoed through. The chapel dotted suddenly. With a deep groan, the altar shifted, revealing a dark staircase descending into the ground. My breath caught. "Good Lord!" Poirot's voice was quiet, but firm. "Let us see what truth lies hidden." Without hesitation, he stepped into the darkness, and I followed. Chapter 12. The Shadow. Below. The air was damp, thick with the scent of earth and decay. As Poirot led the way down the narrow staircase, our footsteps echoed against the cold stone walls. The passage beneath the chapel was ancient, carved from rock, its walls lined with crumbling mortar. I shivered, feeling the weight of centuries pressing in around us. The oil lamp in Poirot's hand flickered, its flame casting long, trembling shadows. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, "we are descending into secrets long buried." I swallowed hard. "And you suspect Evelyn's truth is hidden down here?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, but I fear we may not be the only ones searching." The words sent a chill through me, and I glanced over my shoulder. The dark passage behind us was silent, yet the weight of unseen eyes pressed upon me. The staircase ended abruptly, opening into a low-ceiling chamber. Stone pillars supported the roof, their surfaces covered in faded carvings. Along the edges of the room, wooden crates enrusted. Tools lay abandoned. At the center stood an iron door, its surface covered in intricate symbols. Poirot stepped forward, running his gloved fingers over the markings. "Fascinating," he murmured. "These symbols, they are not merely decorative." I frowned, stepping closer. "You mean they mean something?" Poirot nodded. "A code, perhaps, or a warning." I felt a sudden unease. "Poirot, do you think Evelyn came through here?" He studied the door in silence, then pointed to the dust-covered floor. "Their faint footprints stopped My heart pounded. Poirot straightened. She was here, Hastings, and not long ago. I took a deep breath. Then we have to follow. Poirot reached for the rusted handle, twisting it gently. The door groaned, metal scraping against stone, and then it swung open. Beyond it, darkness stretched ahead. Poirot lifted the lamp higher. Come, mon ami. The truth awaits. We stepped through the iron doorway, the air growing colder as we moved. Forward, the corridor stretched deep into the earth, the walls narrowing slightly. The floor was uneven, with patches of loose gravel and puddles of stagnant water. I could hear the distant drip of moisture echoing through the tunnel. Poirot examined the walls as we walked. This passage was constructed long ago, but it has been used recently. How can you tell? He gestured toward the stone surface. Certain parts of the wall were cleaner, as if touched or brushed against. Even the floor, though covered in dust, bore subtle marks, footprints, scuffed stone, the occasional scrape of a boot. Someone had traveled this way recently. Sudden sound, a faint shuffle made us freeze. I gripped Poirot's arm. Did you hear that? He nodded, his expression unreadable. Then dashed silence. My pulse hammered as we continued. After several minutes, the corridor opened into a second chamber larger than the first, with wooden shelves lining the walls. The shelves were filled with old books, bottles of ink, and tattered scrolls. A large wooden table sat in the center, covered in maps and handwritten notes. But what caught my attention was the candle, still burning beside the papers. Poirot's eyes narrowed. We are not alone, Hastings. A creak from the shadows, I turned, sharply just in time to see a figure move at the far end of the room. Then a door slammed shut. Poirot dashed forward, but the door was already locked from the other side. He exhaled. Someone does not wish us to follow. I glanced back at the table. Then, let's see what they left behind. Poirot and I sifted through the papers, our eyes scanning the words. Some were maps of Blackwood Manor. Others were letters many addressed. To Arthur Blackwood. One letter dated 2 weeks ago. Stood out. Poirot read aloud. Arthur, the debts have been settled, but the price was higher than expected. If she learns the truth, we risk everything. I will ensure she never speaks of it. Signed, J.B. I felt a chill. Poirot, does this mean Evelyn found out something dangerous? Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. We, and it means someone, perhaps. Our mysterious J.B. wished to silence her. My stomach turned. Then we have to find her, before it's too late. Poirot tapped his chin. Indeed, mon ami. But first, we must understand what she discovered. I shuffled through the documents again until I found something that made my blood run cold. Sketch of the chapel dot, and beneath it, a drawing of a stone tomb. Poirot studied it carefully. The Blackwood family crypt, I exhaled. You think Evelyn went there? Poirot's gaze was unreadable. Perhaps she was taken there. I stared at the locked door, where the figure had disappeared. If someone was willing to lock us in, they must have been desperate to keep us from following, which meant we were getting dangerously close to the truth. Poirot gathered the most relevant documents and tucked them into his coat. Then he turned to me with that sharp, knowing gaze. Mon ami, he murmured. The next move is ours. I nodded, feeling a sudden surge of determination. Then let's make it count.